Arana, an alien diplomat from the Lanu species, had never been in a situation like this before. She was always known for her strength and grace, respected across many star systems for her ability to negotiate peace between different races. Her reputation was built on years of wisdom, diplomacy, and successful missions. But today, everything had changed. The Lanu people were different from humans in many ways. Their bodies were designed to withstand extreme conditions, their skin tough, and their senses sharp. But their physiology was also more sensitive in certain areas, especially in matters of reproduction. This sensitivity had never been a problem for Arana before, but now it was threatening her life. While traveling to an important peace summit in a neighboring galaxy, Arana suddenly felt a sharp pain in her abdomen, a pain she couldn't explain. At first, she thought it was just a minor discomfort, perhaps from a long journey or the stress of the mission. However, the pain only grew worse. Soon, she could hardly breathe without feeling like something was pressing on her insides. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the summit, but as the hours passed, the pain became unbearable. She was alone on her ship, far from the nearest medical facility, with no way to help herself. The situation was critical. Her people had very few doctors who could treat their rare ailments, and none of them were nearby. The closest solution was to land on a nearby planet, and that planet just happened to be Earth. Arana had heard of Earth before, of course. The humans were known to be a young and somewhat inexperienced race, with many of their advancements still in early stages. Their technology was impressive, but their medicine was far behind the alien races that Arana had worked with over the years. Still, desperate times called for desperate measures. She knew she had to land on Earth and seek help, no matter how hesitant she was to trust a human medic. As her ship descended into Earth's atmosphere, Arana couldn't help but feel a sense of vulnerability. She had always prided herself on her independence, her ability to handle any situation with confidence. Now she was facing something she couldn't control, something that threatened not only her life, but also the success of her mission. If she didn't get help soon, the peace summit she was supposed to attend would be lost, and the galaxy could fall into chaos. The ship landed in a quiet area near a small human city. Arana's senses were on high alert as she stepped out of the ship. She had never been this close to humans before, and she wasn't sure what to expect. They were a curious species, capable of great intelligence, but also known for their unpredictability. She had heard stories of humans being stubborn, arrogant, and sometimes even reckless, but there was no time for hesitation. She made her way to a nearby medical facility, hoping to find someone who could help. As she entered the building, she was greeted by a nurse who seemed both surprised and fascinated by her appearance. Arana could sense the nurse's curiosity, but didn't have the time to explain herself. She needed help, and she needed it quickly. The nurse led her to a room where a human medic was waiting. His name was Dr. Evan Holt, a specialist in interspecies medicine. Arana looked him over carefully as she entered the room. He was younger than she had expected, his face showing a mixture of professionalism and concern. He didn't seem afraid of her, though. In fact, he appeared to be more focused on her condition than anything else. "Good evening," Dr. Holt said, his voice calm but confident. "I understand you're in pain. I'll do my best to help." Arana hesitated for a moment. She had never trusted humans before, and she certainly didn't trust them with something as important as her health. But there was no other choice. She had to let him try. I need help," Arana said, her voice steady despite the pain she was feeling. "There is a clot in a sensitive area. It's affecting my health." Dr. Holt raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by her words. "I see. You've come to the right place, then. I've treated many species before, though I must admit, I've never encountered a Lanu before. But I'll do my best to help." Arana wasn't sure what to think. She had expected to be met with disbelief, or even fear. Instead, Dr. Holt seemed calm and confident, like he had dealt with situations like hers before. His words, though simple, gave her a small sense of comfort. She took a deep breath and nodded. Do what you must. As Dr. Holt began preparing for the treatment, Arana realized that for the first time in her life, she was truly at the mercy of another species. She had always been the one in control, the one who held the power. But now, she had to place her trust in a human, someone she had never considered a real threat to her people. The pain in her body continued to grow, but there was a small glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human would be able to do what her own people could not. Dr. Evan Holt was no stranger to working with aliens, but when he saw Arana, a Lanu diplomat, standing in front of him, he couldn't hide his surprise. She was taller than the average human, with smooth, shimmering skin that seemed to glow under the lights of the medical room. Her large, expressive eyes held a depth that hinted at years of wisdom and experience, and her posture was both graceful and confident, even though she was clearly in pain. Despite his calm exterior, Dr. Holt couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. He had treated many species in his career, humans, of course, but also several alien species with unique biology. Still, he had never met someone from the Lanu race before. He had heard of them in academic circles, of their beauty and intelligence, but he had never imagined he would be the one to treat one of them. Please, have a seat, Dr. Holt said, motioning to the medical bed. His voice was smooth and confident, though there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. I'm Dr. Holt. I'll do my best to help. Arana hesitated for a moment before she slowly sat down on the bed, her movements careful. The pain in her abdomen was still there, a sharp ache that wouldn't go away. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to control her breathing. She didn't want to show any weakness, not in front of a human, but the pain was becoming too much to bear. Dr. Holt moved quickly, yet with a sense of calm purpose. He was trained to handle high-stress situations, and this one was no different. He had seen all sorts of injuries, from broken bones to complex internal issues, but this was something he hadn't dealt with before. The Lanu's unique physiology was unlike anything he had encountered. Still, he wasn't intimidated. He had learned to approach each species with respect and patience, understanding that every race had its own way of healing. He pulled up a chair beside her and began speaking in a soft, reassuring tone. You mentioned a clot. Can you tell me more about what you're feeling? Arana opened her eyes and glanced at him. She had expected fear or confusion, but instead, Dr. Holt's face held only focus and empathy. He didn't seem overwhelmed by her condition, and that made her feel a little more at ease. The clot is in a sensitive area, Arana began, her voice steady but strained. It's affecting my reproductive system. I've never had an issue like this before. My people are not prone to such things, but this pain is unlike anything I've ever felt. Dr. Holt nodded, his brow furrowed in concentration. I understand. I've worked with many different species, but each one is unique. I'll need to run some tests to get a better understanding of your biology. Arana watched as he moved to a nearby console, his fingers dancing across the screen. He was quick and efficient, and before long, he had gathered enough data to begin formulating a plan. Arana couldn't help but feel a twinge of respect for the human. He didn't flinch at her condition, or seem distracted by the fact that she was a different species. He was focused on the task at hand. I'll start by making a detailed scan of your body, Dr. Holt explained. It will help me see exactly where the clot is and how it's affecting your internal systems. I know this is uncomfortable, but it's the best way to treat you. Arana nodded silently, bracing herself for the procedure. As the scan began, she could feel a strange, soft hum as the machine worked, and the pain in her abdomen seemed to shift, becoming a dull throb. She didn't know if it was the machine or simply the momentary distraction, but it helped her focus. Dr. Holt stood beside her, monitoring the results as they appeared on his screen. You're in luck, he said after a moment. I can see the clot. It's in a very delicate area, but it's not blocking any major organs, so that's good. Still, We need to dissolve it carefully. Any wrong move could cause more harm than good. Arana's heart skipped a beat. She had always trusted the medical experts from her own species, but now, here she was, relying on a human. Her mind raced with doubts. What if he didn't understand her body the way her people did? What if something went wrong? But Dr. Holt's calm demeanor reassured her. He had been nothing but professional since she arrived, and there was no sign of hesitation in his movements. He was confident, and his confidence helped settle some of Arana's fears. She had to trust him, or she risked losing everything. After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Holt turned back to her. I'm going to begin the treatment now. I'll be gentle, but I need you to stay still. It's going to feel a little strange, but it's necessary. Arana braced herself as he prepared the equipment. There was a brief moment of uncertainty, but she closed her eyes and let go of her fears. She had made the decision to trust this human, and now it was up to him to help her. As Dr. Holt began his work, Arana couldn't help but feel a strange sense of gratitude toward him. In this moment, he wasn't just a human. He was her lifeline. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the medical equipment as Dr. Holt carefully prepared the tools for the procedure. Arana's body was tense, every muscle alert, yet she knew she had no choice but to trust the human medic. Her thoughts were clouded with uncertainty, but she focused on her breathing, trying to calm herself. The pain still throbbed in her abdomen, a reminder of how fragile her situation truly was. Dr. Holt had reassured her that he understood the importance of this procedure, but it was hard to shake the nagging doubts. Could a human really help her? Would his methods work? Her people, the Lanu, were advanced, but in moments like this, the universe didn't offer easy answers. She had to rely on this stranger, someone whose species she had never fully trusted before. You're doing great, Arana, Dr. Holt said, his voice calm and reassuring as he positioned the instrument near her abdomen. This might feel a little strange, but just remember, I'm here to help. Arana nodded, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. The strange warmth of the medical bed beneath her seemed to comfort her slightly, even if the pain in her abdomen didn't go away. She had been in many challenging situations before, but nothing like this. It was humbling to be in a position where she had to rely on someone else. Dr. Holt's steady hands moved over the device, and Arana could feel a small pressure against her skin. The sensation was different, unlike anything she had felt before. It wasn't painful, but it was uncomfortable. The human was using his knowledge of her species' biology to work delicately, trying not to do anything that would worsen her condition. He had explained that his goal was to dissolve the clot, but it wasn't easy. The clot was located in an area that could easily cause damage if not handled with care. As the minutes passed, Arana focused on controlling her thoughts, willing herself to relax. She was no stranger to pain. After all, her people were resilient. But this was different. This was a human doing something she never thought possible. The respect she had felt earlier for Dr. Holt grew as she watched him work. He wasn't rushing, wasn't panicking. He was focused, a true professional. This may take a little longer, Dr. Holt said as he looked over the readings on his screen. The clot is in a tricky place. I need to be extra cautious, but I'm confident we're on the right track. Arana couldn't see the screen, but she trusted him. There was something about his calm demeanor that eased her anxiety. She had encountered many diplomats and warriors in her life, but Dr. Holt was different. He didn't look at her as an alien, as someone from a distant world. To him, she was just a patient in need of help, and that made all the difference. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and Arana began to wonder if this would ever end. The pain hadn't fully subsided, though it was becoming more bearable with each passing moment. Her body was still tense, but the steady pressure from Dr. Holt's treatment gave her hope that things were improving. Dr. Holt paused for a moment and turned to her. How are you feeling, Arana? Any changes? Arana took a deep breath, trying to assess how her body was responding. The pain in her abdomen had lessened slightly, but she still felt discomfort. She placed a hand on her stomach and exhaled slowly. It's better, but the pain hasn't gone away completely. That's to be expected, Dr. Holt replied. It takes time for the clot to break down fully. I'll need to continue for a little longer. Arana nodded, grateful for his honest words. She had been afraid that this would be a one-time fix, but it was clear that the treatment required patience, and for the first time in a long while, she realized how important it was to trust the process. Her usual way of handling things, taking charge and solving problems, wasn't going to work here. She had to let go and allow someone else to take the lead. As Dr. Holt worked, Arana's mind wandered back to her mission. She had been on her way to a summit that could change the course of history for her people. What would happen if she couldn't make it? What if she wasn't well enough to fulfill her duty? The peace between galaxies depended on her, and right now, she couldn't help but feel like a failure. But then she remembered the humans. Despite their flaws and their youth, they had something powerful: resilience. They had overcome countless obstacles, learned from their mistakes, and continued to fight for what they believed in. Maybe, just maybe, there was something she could learn from them. Perhaps this human, Dr. Holt, was a symbol of that resilience. He wasn't giving up on her. He was doing everything he could to help, and in that moment, she realized that perhaps her mission wasn't lost. "I'm ready to continue," Dr. Holt said, breaking her thoughts. "We're close. Just a little longer, Arana." She nodded, her mind focused on the process ahead. She was no longer afraid, no longer uncertain. She had placed her trust in this human, and now, all she had to do was allow him to finish what he started. The room was quiet again, save for the soft beeping of the monitors and the hum of the medical equipment. Dr. Holt had been working carefully, almost like an artist crafting a delicate masterpiece. Arana could feel the pressure and gentle movements against her abdomen as he continued to dissolve the clot, inch by inch. The pain had lessened even more now, though there was still some discomfort lingering in the background. For a moment, Arana closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the slight relief. She hadn't realized how much of a toll the pain had taken on her until now. Her body had been tense for so long, the constant discomfort gnawing at her. But with Dr. Holt's careful work, it was slowly fading. Her breathing had steadied, her mind clearer than before. She had placed her trust in a human, someone from a species that, just days ago, she would have considered beneath her people. And yet here she was, relying on this human to save her. The thought was humbling. She had traveled the stars, seen countless civilizations, but none had ever offered the kind of help she had received from this human. Dr. Holt had proven himself as not just a healer, but as someone who cared for his patients, regardless of their species. "Almost there," Dr. Holt said, his voice calm as he continued to monitor the readings. "I can see the clot breaking down. You're doing great, Arana." Arana nodded slowly, unable to speak at first. She had always been strong, independent, traits that her people valued highly. But now, lying on this bed, relying on a human to heal her, she had learned something new about herself. She wasn't invincible. She couldn't do everything alone. And sometimes, it was okay to rely on others. "You're sure everything is going as planned?" Arana asked, her voice soft but steady. She had to ask, to reassure herself that the procedure was going well. Dr. Holt glanced up at her, a reassuring smile crossing his face. "Yes, everything is going exactly as planned. The clot is dissolving, and soon you'll be free of it. Just a few more minutes." Arana relaxed at his words. She had been afraid that something might go wrong, that the clot might cause more damage, but Dr. Holt's confidence eased her worries. She trusted him now, more than she ever thought she would trust a human. She glanced up at him, studying his focused expression. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his hands moving with precision as he carefully adjusted the equipment. He was so calm, so composed. It was almost as though nothing in the universe could shake his determination to help her. "How do you do it?" she asked suddenly. "How do you stay so calm?" Dr. Holt paused for a moment, glancing at her in surprise. Stay calm. Well, it's part of the job. I've had to face a lot of difficult situations, but I've learned that staying calm helps. It keeps my mind sharp and allows me to think clearly. I've seen enough to know that panicking doesn't help anyone. Arana considered his words. It was a trait her people valued as well, remaining composed, even in the face of danger. But hearing Dr. Holt's explanation gave her a new perspective. It wasn't just about keeping control for the sake of appearances. It was about having the presence of mind to make the right decisions, even when things felt uncertain. "Do you ever get scared?" she asked, genuinely curious. She had never asked anyone this question before. Her people prided themselves on their bravery, but even they had their moments of fear. Dr. Holt smiled, but there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. "Of course I do. Fear is a natural feeling, but the key is not letting it control you. It's about facing it head-on and choosing to do what's necessary, no matter how difficult it is." Arana thought about that. She had faced fear many times before, on the battlefield, in political negotiations, and even in the vast emptiness of space. But this was different. This was personal. For the first time, she was in a position where she couldn't control the outcome. She had to place her trust in someone else, and that was not an easy thing for her to do. The sound of Dr. Holt's voice brought her back to the present. "All right, Arana, the clot is gone. It's no longer blocking anything, and your internal systems are returning to normal." Arana's eyes opened wide in relief. She had expected the pain to linger, but now, it was almost completely gone. Her body felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. She placed a hand over her stomach, feeling the smoothness of her skin without the constant throb that had plagued her for so long. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with gratitude. "You've saved me." Dr. Holt stood up, wiping his hands on a nearby cloth. "It was my job. You don't need to thank me." But Arana knew better. She had been through enough to understand that sometimes people needed to hear those words. It wasn't just about fixing someone's body. It was about offering them kindness and care when they were at their most vulnerable. "You don't understand," Arana said quietly. "You've given me more than just medical help. You've given me something I didn't expect. Trust." Dr. Holt looked at her, his expression softening. "And you've given me a reminder of how important it is to treat everyone with respect, no matter where they come from." In that moment, something between them shifted. They were no longer just doctor and patient. They were two beings, connected by their shared experiences, their mutual respect for one another. And for Arana, it was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where trust was not something to be feared, but something to be cherished. The days that followed felt like a blur to Arana. The physical pain from the clot had subsided, leaving only a faint memory of the discomfort she had endured. But it was the emotional shift that lingered most in her mind. She found herself thinking more about the human doctor who had saved her life, Dr. Holt. It was not just his skill or his calm demeanor that had impressed her. It was his quiet confidence, his ability to make her feel like her pain mattered, no matter her species. In her world, strength was prized above all else, and vulnerability was something to be hidden away. But Dr. Holt had treated her with kindness and respect, something that, for the first time, made her feel truly seen. She had seen humans before, of course, during her travels across the galaxy, but she had never interacted with one this closely. Never had she experienced their care in such a personal way. It made her question everything she had known about the species. The initial doubt she had felt when she first arrived on Earth had slowly faded, replaced by a deep curiosity about these humans. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, Arana found herself in the quiet medical room again. Dr. Holt had insisted she take some time to rest, but tonight she felt an odd sense of restlessness. She stood by the window, staring out at the distant lights of the city. The view from the medical center was breathtaking. Earth was beautiful, in a way she hadn't noticed before. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching. She turned to see Dr. Holt standing in the doorway, holding a tray of food. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked gently, his eyes warm with concern. Arana shook her head, offering a small smile. "No, not really. I've been thinking. A lot." Dr. Holt placed the tray on a nearby table, then moved to stand next to her, looking out at the city as well. "What's on your mind?" Arana hesitated. She had never been one to share her personal thoughts, especially not with someone who was a stranger just days ago. But Dr. Holt had become something more than that to her, someone she trusted. "I've seen so many worlds, Dr. Holt, and I've met so many beings, but I've never met anyone like you." He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're different. You humans, you have this kindness, this ability to care for others, even when they're not like you. I thought that was something rare, something unusual. But you've shown me that it's not. That kindness is more common than I realized." Dr. Holt looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "I think the universe has a funny way of teaching us lessons when we least expect it. You've been a reminder for me too." Arana turned to face him, surprised. "A reminder of what?" He smiled softly, the lines around his eyes crinkling slightly. "A reminder that no matter how different we are, we all need help sometimes. And it's okay to ask for it. It's okay to trust someone else." Arana's heart skipped a beat. She had never thought of herself as someone who needed help, someone who could be vulnerable. But Dr. Holt's words hit her in a way that made her reconsider. Perhaps the strength she had always prided herself on wasn't just about standing alone. Maybe real strength came from knowing when to trust others, when to open up and let someone in. As she stood there, feeling a quiet connection between them, Dr. Holt's voice broke the silence once more. "I know you've been through a lot, Arana, but you're stronger than you think. You've been through so much, and yet here you are, still standing." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink in. She had endured a great deal over her life, but it wasn't just the hardships that had shaped her. It was the moments like these, the moments of unexpected kindness, the moments of vulnerability, that had taught her the most. For the first time in a long while, Arana allowed herself to relax. She no longer felt the need to hide behind her walls of strength. Instead, she felt a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. Even in this strange new world, she was no longer just a visitor on Earth. She was someone who had found something meaningful here. Dr. Holt placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. "I know things are different for you now, but you're not alone, Arana. You never have to be alone." The words, simple as they were, meant more than she could express. She had come to Earth expecting only to heal physically, but in the process, she had found something far more valuable. A connection, a reason to keep going, even when things felt uncertain. For the first time in her life, Arana allowed herself to believe in the possibility of change. She had faced darkness, but now she was starting to see a glimmer of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this human, this doctor who had saved her, could be the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The days after Arana's emotional breakthrough with Dr. Holt felt different. There was a quiet calmness inside her that hadn't been there before. She had always relied on her own strength, but now she felt something new, a sense of trust, of connection to another being. Despite the peaceful feeling inside her, Arana knew that her journey wasn't over. She still had questions, doubts, and uncertainties, but she also knew one thing for certain. She couldn't face it all alone anymore. It was early morning when Dr. Holt arrived at her room again, as he did most days. This time, he wasn't holding a medical tray or clipboard, but instead he had a simple smile on his face. "Morning, Arana," he greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Dr. Holt," she replied, her voice carrying a softness she had never allowed herself before. She was still getting used to the idea of being this open with someone, but with him, it didn't feel so hard. "I was thinking," he began, taking the seat across from her. "You've been through so much. You've had to heal physically, emotionally, and even mentally. I think it's time for you to get out of this room and see a bit more of Earth." Arana raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his suggestion. "What do you mean?" He leaned back slightly, his eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and kindness. "I think you need a change of scenery, a new experience. How about a trip to the park? Just a chance to breathe in some fresh air. See the world beyond these walls. It might help you relax and see things from a different perspective." Arana was taken aback. The idea of leaving the medical center, even for a short time, felt strange. She had been in recovery for so long, and the thought of being outside, of being around so many humans, made her nervous. But there was something in Dr. Holt's expression, something reassuring, that made her think maybe it was worth it. Maybe this could be the start of something new. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. "All right, Dr. Holt. I'll give it a try." A smile spread across his face as he stood up. "Great. I'll get everything ready. Just give me a few minutes." As he left the room, Arana sat back in her chair, taking a deep breath. The idea of venturing out into the world, into this strange new place she had come to, was both exciting and frightening. She had never been someone to step out of her comfort zone, but lately things were different. She had been learning to open herself up to new experiences, and this felt like another step in that direction. A short time later, Dr. Holt returned with a wheelchair. "Ready?" he asked, his voice cheerful. Arana nodded again, this time with more confidence. Dr. Holt gently helped her into the chair and pushed it through the halls of the medical center. The world outside seemed so distant, so unfamiliar, but with each turn, the excitement in her chest grew. As they reached the doors, the bright sunlight hit her face, and Arana felt a warmth she had never felt before. The air was fresh and clean, and the sounds of the city, of birds chirping, of people talking, of the distant hum of cars, were all so different from what she was used to. For a moment, she closed her eyes and simply let herself breathe in the newness of it all. Dr. Holt wheeled her down the path that led to a nearby park. The area was filled with trees and flowers, their colors vibrant against the green grass. It was peaceful. Arana had never seen anything like it. Where she came from, the natural world was a far cry from this. Everything was either controlled or harshly artificial. Earth, on the other hand, seemed to hold a quiet beauty that took her by surprise. "This is amazing," Arana whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "I'm glad you like it," Dr. Holt said, pushing the wheelchair slowly along the path. "I thought you might." They passed by a pond, its surface glistening in the sunlight, and Arana watched as children played nearby, their laughter echoing in the air. There was something so human about this, so simple, so pure. It made her realize how much she had missed by being so closed off from the world around her. "I've been wondering," she said quietly, after a long pause, "how do you stay so calm? I've seen humans get angry, frustrated, just like anyone else. But you, Dr. Holt, you never seem to lose your cool. You're always so peaceful." Dr. Holt looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "I think it's because I've seen a lot in my time as a medic. I've seen people at their worst, and I've seen them at their best. But in the end, we're all just trying to make it through the day. I've learned that if I can be calm, if I can stay focused on what really matters, I can help others do the same." Arana nodded slowly, absorbing his words. There was a quiet wisdom in them. Maybe she had been too focused on surviving to see the beauty in living. Maybe there was more to this life than just existing. As they continued through the park, Arana felt a new sense of peace settling over her. Maybe Earth wasn't so bad after all. Maybe, just maybe, this new beginning was exactly what she needed. The days that followed were filled with small steps, each one leading Arana toward a future she never thought possible. Every moment outside, every interaction with the humans around her, brought something new. At times, the world felt overwhelming, but the gentle support of Dr. Holt made it easier to face. One afternoon, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Arana sat beside Dr. Holt on a park bench. They had been spending more time together, talking about Earth, her homeworld, and everything in between. She could feel herself changing, growing more comfortable with the life she was now living. "I never imagined I'd be here, on Earth, learning how to live a different life," Arana said, her voice soft but steady. "Back on my world, everything was so strict, so structured. I didn't have the freedom to just be." Dr. Holt smiled, looking out at the horizon. "Sometimes freedom is the hardest thing to find, but it's the most important, too. You're doing it, Arana. You're finding your own way." Arana looked at him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had come to trust him, not just as her doctor, but as a friend who had helped her heal in ways she never expected. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling a warmth spread inside her. "I couldn't have done it without you." Dr. Holt's smile grew wider. "You've done the hard part. I'm just here to support you." As the days passed, Arana's life began to feel more normal. She spent time in the park, she took walks, and she even started learning more about Earth's culture and history. But there was always a lingering question in her mind. What would happen next? She had started to heal, physically and emotionally, but where did she fit into this strange new world? One afternoon, after spending hours walking through the bustling streets of the city, Arana found herself at a crossroads. She was sitting alone on a bench, watching the people around her. They all seemed so confident, so sure of their place in the world. Arana felt a pang of uncertainty. She wasn't sure where she belonged, or what her future held. Dr. Holt, who had been walking behind her, noticed her sitting there, deep in thought. He walked up to her, sitting beside her on the bench. "What's on your mind?" Arana sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know. I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I can't help wondering what comes next. What do I do now?" Dr. Holt turned to her, his expression serious but kind. "Arana, you don't have to have it all figured out. You've been through a lot. Take it one step at a time. Life doesn't have to be planned out perfectly. What matters is that you're here now, and you're learning to live again." She looked at him, his words sinking in. It was true. She didn't have to know everything. What mattered was that she was still moving forward, no matter how uncertain the future seemed. "I guess you're right," Arana said, smiling a little. "I don't have to know everything today. Just one step at a time." Dr. Holt smiled back. "Exactly. And I'm here to walk with you, every step of the way." The reassurance in his words filled her with a new sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find her place here. Earth was a strange world, but it also had its own beauty, one that she was beginning to appreciate. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in the golden glow of twilight, Arana and Dr. Holt sat together in silence. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Arana felt at peace. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She had come to realize that the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to embrace. And with Dr. Holt by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next.